Representative Ranjit Puri is the new House Democratic leader. He's in the queue. He'll join us in the conversation later, but our lead story is lawmakers are back for the new year and what's on the agenda. Around the OTR table, Craig Mauger, Jordan Hermany, and Rick Pluta. Sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Welcome to Studio C. Happy New Year, everybody. Everybody survived the holidays. And as the old movie said, they're back. Let's take a look. A new Michigan House composed of 65 men and 45 women, mostly between the ages of 45 and over 65, met for the first time today under Republican House control. The Democrats had control last year, but now the Republicans have 58 votes and the Ds 52. And according to tradition, the new Democratic House leader endorsed the nomination of Matt Hall to be the Republican Speaker, with a warning about, quote, petty politics.
Bipartisanship isn't just a buzzword, it's a necessity. Representative Hall will be presented with the opportunity to reach across the aisle to find common ground, ensuring this chamber prioritizes pragmatic policy over petty politics.
And in keeping with the unity theme of the day, all the Democrats joined the Republicans in supporting Mr. Hall to be Speaker by a 110-0 vote. Speaker Hall told everybody that with his party in charge, it would restore balance to state government. That means there would still be a Democratic governor and a Democratic senator, but the Republicans would have a stronger voice this year than they did last year.
And so I just want to tell everyone here that was part of that, we did it, and you were all part of this. This is for you. Even the ones over here on the other, but I'll just say this, we did it, and I hope you share in this today, because this is a long time coming, bringing balance back to state government.
But behind the scenes, the Speaker broke a long-standing tradition. He is banning the governor's legislative lobbyists from appearing on the House floor. He's also created a host of oversight committees to examine the conduct of the governor's departments, the Democratic State Attorney General Dana Nessel, and perhaps Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. He made no reference to any of that in his short speech as he talked about working together. However, one unnamed Democrat believes the Speaker's ban on the governor's lobbyist was not a sign of unity, but, quote, petty. And so it begins. Well, there you go. That was kind of a mixed bag from Mr. Hall. Yes?
Indeed. Democrats can't say that they couldn't have seen this coming. If you want to talk about bipartisanship, let's just think back to last month when bills were being rammed through in the dead of night with only Democratic votes backing them. You're kind of in the bed that you've made now. That being said, Hall does seem to be taking a very, very sharp attack on transparency, on oversight with respect to the current administration. And we will have to see how that bodes for the relationships between Senate Democratic leader Winnie Brinks and Governor Gretchen Whitmer, considering he will have to work with them in order to get any kind of Republican policy across the finish line this year.
I think, along with the fact that Speaker Hall is actually delaying sending to the governor bills that were adopted in the last session, is a strong signal that he is going to use every lever and button of power available to try and get his way in the State House in ways that we have not seen for a very, very long time.
There are two sides of Matt Hall, and there have been for a long time. Two sides.
Two?
Well, two that I'm focusing on for these remarks. One side is the deal maker, Matt Hall. He's made a lot of deals with Democrats over his time in the legislature. He's taken moderate stances on firearm regulations, some other things. And there's this other side that's this red meat, give to the base of the Republican Party, very Trump-like operator sometimes. And it's this question of which side is he going to go with? How is he going to operate? Or is it a combination of both? Is it 1 hour he is the person trying to turn over tables in the Capitol, and the other hour he's meeting with the governor and talking to her about how can we get economic development projects done? that he is the person now that's going to drive everything in the Capitol, it seems like. And he is the guy that seems to love politics right now and wants to be there, wants to be messing with the Democrats, wants to change how Lansing's operating.
Look, the speaker can do whatever a speaker wants to do. I'm just suggesting in the spirit of the day, which is supposed to be unity. By the way, he was concerned that there weren't going to be 110 votes up there. You know who he's concerned about?
Probably some of his own caucus members.
Caucus. The Freedom Caucus, and he has not confirmed this, but he tipped his hand when he said one of the legislators that had been sick said, "I need you here." And I thought, boy, that's a strange thing to say because he got 100. Well, doing a little deep, the Freedom Caucus could have taken a walk on him, so he's concerned about that.
Well, he gave them in the House rules something that they badly wanted and something that was kind of unprecedented for how the Michigan House operates, saying, hey, your staff, the staff members of the individual members, they're under your guidance, not the speaker's leadership. In the past, the speaker has actually been the person managing, under the official guise of how the House operates, every employee. And he said, I'm not going to be able to take away your staff if you do something I don't like. The Freedom Caucus members, Josh Shriver, Jim DeSena, they love this. And I'm guessing that's part of the reason they voted for him.
All right, so
but let's not assume that Matt Hall doesn't have in mind other ways to corral his caucus other than things like affecting office staff and privileges, maybe off the floor. He can't, deny them the right to vote. That's in the Constitution, but there's still a lot of other powers available.
Start with sitting on a bill that you want. Okay, go there and work backwards. All right, so first bill's out of the chute. They do deal with this tip thing, and the Senate has a plan, the House has a plan. Read the tea leaves here for me.
Yeah, so I mean, in the biggest among them is one, we would still see a $15 minimum wage in both plans. It does just differ by a year or so. I believe the House plan would put it by 2029. The Senate plan would put it by 2027. The real sticking point here is where we're at with the tipped wage. The House plan, backed by Republicans, keeps the tipping wage at the status quo, which I believe is 38% of whatever the minimum wage is. Right now, that's $3.93 an hour. The Senate plan would increase that to roughly 60%, I believe, of the minimum wage by sometime in 2030. I believe it's 2035. And that's kind of where we see the negotiation room for this, and that's where we'll probably be able to find some common ground. But Republicans seem pretty firm on keeping it at that 38% figure.
It looks like the tip folks like the House plan a little more than the Senate.
Yeah, the restaurant industry wants that 38% to maintain. There are moderate House Democrats who are trying to find some path in between. And there's a lot of people that we have not heard from yet, the interest groups that put this issue before the legislature in 2018, who want that 100% still. I think the UAW spoke out in lame duck that they wanted it raised to 100%. And that's where we talk about changing how tipping works, changing how the restaurant industry works. And we're going to have this huge fight now play out. Is it 38%? Is it 60? Or does it stay at 100? And no matter where you go, there's going to be a large faction of the political scene angry.
Well,
and that argument seems, at least intuitively, pretty strong, which is that this is something that was a petition campaign that people signed them, and
we're backed by heavy progressive donors. I mean, there are some major progressive players behind this, and they're not going to just watch the House Dem majority that they helped get there, hand this over to the Republicans in the restaurant industry. And that's going to be fascinating.
At the same time, though, what the one thing the restaurant industry has going for them is they've been really able to rally restaurateurs, workers to, I mean, at the Capitol, we've had a number of demonstrations, people filling the halls. I went to one backed by One Fair Wage, which is the group that wants to do away with the tipped wage. The place that I went to, Cadillac Place in Detroit, they didn't even know that this event was going on. It got moved outside. There were more reporters there than people, and there was one person who had worked at a restaurant before, two lawmakers, and basically the argument was, well, please, that's not very convincing.
They are really leaning on Winnie, the leader in the Senate, the good state senator over in West Michigan. Look, they got a lot of troops. Okay, I think they're going to get something out of this. I do. And the good news is there's a deadline. Lawmakers always work better if they can look over there and say, we got to get this puppy done by February 21 or sooner.
Well, yes, although they could conceivably go past that deadline and then come up with something else, because the minimum wage is going up in stages. It's just every time it moves up in a different stage, then you lose a certain amount of leverage.
All right, let's talk about the governor for a second. She's not endorsing in the governor's race. Were you surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised by it. I mean, I think she's going to try to find a path to unify the party going forward, if that's possible. And why would she get involved in this? It's going to feature possibly her running mate, Garland Gilchrist, and then possibly the Secretary of State, who might be the early frontrunner for the Dem nomination. So wading into this would be extremely complicated for the governor.
Some might argue tradition. Governors introduced, the governors embraced their lieutenant governors, as she pointed out.
What was her response?
And how much has that really worked?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not
I think it's an acknowledgement that Garland will, if he gets into this, start out as probably the underdog in this race, whether it's against Pete Buttigieg, whether it's against Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who's already out there touring the state, talking to voters. He would have work to do. I'm not saying it's impossible for him to make this a huge race. There is a lane for someone to be a challenger to Benson, but he would have a lot of work to do and ground to make up.
And let's not forget, too, that in the general election, that it's the pattern in Michigan has been that the successor to the governor of one party is from a different party.
We go in cycles. We'll give you 8 years, okay, and see what you can do, and then let's try something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's got to figure into the machinations here.
And you have
Detroit, what do you do?
Yeah. You have Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan looming over all of this. Yeah. I mean, that's going to make it very difficult for Democrats too. If he stays in the race, he will take some votes from the Democratic nominee, and that's going to be a tough obstacle.
She clearly did not want to get into the Duggan story. Basically said, I'm not going to be critical. Well, her candidate for Democratic Party chair, Curtis Sertel, is critical of Mike Duggan. Can the governor sit this thing out?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine, frankly. Duggan, the issue here with Duggan is he continues to run as an independent, which depending on how long the voters' memories can be in this gubernatorial race, he's got a heck of a point with looking back at lame duck and the dysfunction that happened there with House Democrats.
There's a commercial ready to be done.
There is. And so,
which he was involved in. I mean, his staff was involved in that. So this idea that this benefits him, I don't quite understand.
I was told by an unconfirmed source that he was stirring the pot to make sure it didn't work.
Well, I think he was trying to get some bills that he wanted across the finish line, which put him involved in this whole process, whether he was trying to cause disruption or trying to get these measures that were important to the city of Detroit through the end. Those are two different ways to view it. But I mean, he was involved in this. He is a political player in the Capitol. He's been there for years and decades, and for him to say, hey, this dysfunction's crazy, well, he's been a part of it for a long time as well.
But still make the point about, he's a nonpartisan, bipartisan, still partisan political player.
Yeah, I was going to say nonpartisan up until a couple months ago. He was a loud backer of Joe Biden. He endorsed Kamala Harris when she became the Democratic nominee, and then after she lost, he said, I can't believe how the system works. I mean, those are the facts of the situation.
And by the way, once there is a Democratic nominee, Gretchen Whitmer really has no choice at that point.
That's true.
But the strategy from the Duggan people is they're not going to play the game. I called him up on a story when we had Jocelyn Benson on here. She never referred to him by name, but remember the firefighter thing? Okay, you got to go into the fire, you might save some lives. I said, can you guys give me a comment? Yeah, they wrote back and said, basically, we're not getting drawn into this, which is an interesting strategy. So none of the work that we do, get one side, get the other side with him, we're going to get crickets.
I mean, well, and you see that too with the Whitmer administration, with the Trump administration now incoming. They're taking a far more step back from being the fire throwers that they were in his previous administration. They're much more committed to working with the Trump administration. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you do start to kind of see that swing, because you do hear from people constantly how sick they are of just all of this fighting, this partisanship. Please, let's get something done. And then on top of that, I mean, it's just not conducive. When you think about actually getting something done, all of this arguing back and forth, it results in virtually nothing, again, if we go back and look at lame duck.
And you have a Republican state house that you've got to deal with, and there is plenty of time once Trump is in office to start playing that role.
Let's have a pool. When do we get the picture of Trump and the governor together in the Oval Office? The over and under. Don't answer that.
I'm hanging somewhere around never.
Oh, really? I think you'd be wrong. All right, let's call in our guest, who is the new Democratic leader of the House Representative. Are you with us?
I am.
Congratulations on your new job. So how's life in the minority?
It's a transition. Obviously, we're just the first week in here, but things move fast in Lansing. But I'm excited to take the helm here.
So is there anything that Mr. Hall did this week or prior to that gave you pause?
I like we were talking about earlier. I think again, it's the first week. There's a number of norms and tradition and precedent that I think are commonplace in the institution. Some things have gone very different. We're not trying to make overarching opinions as we are still in the first week here, but we're still kind of waiting for the cues of how this is exactly going to go.
Yes, with all due respect, though, in your remarks, you did use the term petty politics, and what were you thinking when you wrote that line?
Well, I think we should fray away from that. I think
What's an example of
listening
that?
to your segment earlier.
Banning the governor's lobbyists, is that petty politics?
It's certainly unprecedented, and I think, as we are negotiating the House rules, not getting a chance to actually do that in good faith, and just kind of understanding that we are here to get stuff done, and there's kind of multiple ways that these 2 years can go. We can actually work together, come together for the people of Michigan, which is something I think we always talk about, or we can get drowned in the partisan and petty politics that seems to be more commonplace nowadays.
Jordan.
To that point, you mentioned House rules. Yesterday during a roundtable, House Speaker Matt Hall said that you offered some counter rules, one of which dealt with, as part of the House rules now, there are earmarks that need to be disclosed. Who is backing them? Where are they going to? He said that your edition of House rules that you put forward would have done away with that. And I'm curious if, one, that's true, and two, if so, why?
The House rules that we came back with were just aligned with the House rules that I think were adopted last term, and with some updates respecting where they wanted to go this year. We're well aware that the dynamics have changed, that the Democratic Party is no longer in majority, and so we obviously respect that cadence. But the rules that we came back were no overarching changes that were any more really that drastic from the and really aligned with the rules that we had last term.
Well, Representative, but that's one that was pretty roundly blasted when it came to light. Why did you keep that in your proposed set of rules then?
So I myself was not involved in that particular negotiation, but I can tell you, I don't think there's anyone that's not open to some level of transparency for these projects. There's a difference between transparency and weaponizing. But yes, I think there's absolutely a need for more transparency in government.
Should lawmakers be required to disclose pork barrel spending? These kinds of grants that go millions of dollars sometimes to projects within their districts, but people maybe aren't aware of who's sponsoring them or who exactly is the intended recipient. Do you believe that those should be in there?
I believe there should be a level of transparency, and my understanding that there is some of that already, but in the absence there isn't. I think yes. I think the more transparent we can be, the better.
So you say a level. What does that mean, though? I'm sorry if you could just give more of an example.
No, what I was saying is I believe that there's already a level of transparency. I thought some of these things are disclosed as a sponsor and where it's going, and if it's not, then yes, I think increased transparency is a good thing.
Leader, former Speaker Tate's a member of your caucus. There are a bunch of bills, 9 of them, that are, viewed as important to some of your constituents, some of the groups that support the House Democrats. He did not ensure that those bills were sent to the governor for her signature. Have you asked him, because he's not telling us, why did you not send these bills? And if so, what did he say?
So I think, as we're kind of getting into this new role, there's kind of a lot that's thrown at you. And so you have to quickly become an expert in a lot of things, And so in some of these conversations that we've had about the 9 bills, I think it's, I don't know exactly kind of where the process broke down. I know Hall is taking credit for it, or Speaker Hall is taking credit for it yesterday in some reporting that he's saying he's not transmitting these from our initial conversations. We were told that everything was done. It was very commonplace for some of these bills to not be transmitted by December 31st. That the fact that some of them went into the new year is just more because of procedural issues of presenting bills to the governor takes time, and this is kind of the normal run of business. And so it is my understanding that there's not a timing issue involved here, but something else about these 9 bills.
Did you ask Speaker Tate if the bills, why he didn't insure the bills? I mean, that was my question. I'll just ask one more time.
Yeah, so I have not talked to Speaker Tate directly, but I have talked to his team, and we talked to his team last year, and we were told that, again, everything's following the normal procedure, and that they have no reason to think that these wouldn't get done.
How would you engage with the House Republican leadership if they sit on bills that were adopted by the House and the Senate and sent to the governor and are sitting in, I guess, the clerk's office because they're not being sent over to the governor? What would you do in the event that that's an indefinite course?
I think that would be extremely frustrating, and I think it would be just a clear violation of precedent. And there's actually some legal concerns here, and I know. Again, we're just a few days into this, so it's hard to make overarching opinions and statements and trying to understand what's happening. There's a little bit of a gray area here because we're still exactly trying to figure out where the process broke down. But, I know in talking to stakeholders and talking to legal experts and talking to our counterparts, everyone's ready to kind of fight this to the highest levels, including litigation. And so, again, for me, it's kind of understanding fact, understanding what is and why things are happening here. And then we'll be ready to obviously proceed by any means necessary.
So you expect a lawsuit if he doesn't forward these to the governor?
I've talked to plenty who are interested in seeing that and going down that route.
Plenty of who?
Just stakeholders I've talked to. I don't think that it's going to come internally from us, but engaging with various people in the Lansing community. Again, like we're talking about litigation, so I don't want to jump the gun here, but I can tell you I've had multiple conversations of those interested in pursuing litigation, if that's what it comes to.
Representative, did you use the language witch hunt to describe the Speaker's creation of these oversight committees to look at the governor's administration and other things? Did you use that term?
I did, in the sense where I don't think that government should be used as a witch hunt. Again, like with everything we are doing, it is really hard to make overarching opinions as we're 2 or 3 days into the term.
Well, what is it? Wait a second. What is the difference between a witch hunt and doing your due diligence to see if tax dollars are being spent appropriately?
Well, there's a difference between transparency and using committees to uncover that. And there's a difference between weaponizing it and politicizing it. And so, all I'm saying is that I don't think there's anyone that's against more transparency, but I think there are people that are against weaponizing these committees to feed a political narrative or for political gain.
So Mr. Hall is just out to get the governor.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say. Is I'm not here to make overarching opinions. I'm saying that's exactly what we should not be doing, and that's what I hope that we don't do. But when you are laying a foundation to this, that is something that could happen. And so, we're into the first week of the term, so there's a lot of uncertainty into how this is going to go. But if you are reading the tea leaves, it's, you can see that we're getting set up for the possibility of those things happening.
When we go back to lame duck, Representative Karen Whitsett of Detroit got a lot of flack for skipping session. Just curious where you're at with respect to conversations of potentially kicking her out of the caucus.
Our relationship with Rep. Whitsett is special. I think this term is really not going to be different than how it's been in previous terms, especially when we're in the minority. I have not served with her as I'm only in my third term. I know she's been here for a term or two longer than me, but her normal cadence in the minority has been not to really participate in the Democratic caucus, to kind of sit out. And so in the few conversations I've had with her, they've been kind of pleasant in nature, and we've kind of reached a mutual understanding that she does not want to partake in the caucus. And I think, for the time being, for the short term, that works with the broader caucus of just a way that's going to work for everybody.
Do you consider her a member of the caucus or not?
She is a member of our caucus.
To follow up on that, Representative Peter Herzberg was also somebody who was blamed towards the end of term. Where are you guys at with respect to potentially punishing him? And then I guess as a follow to that, Speaker Hall alleged that you potentially, through committee assignments, were using committee assignments punitively, and I was wondering if it was with respect to either one of those two members.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up. I have not submitted committee assignments, and so I'm not sure where Speaker Hall is coming up with that. We have a very independent committee-on-committee process, and you have that I'm not involved in. The independent body is still collecting surveys and data, just like they've done, term after term here in Lansing, and nothing has been submitted from our end to the Republican Party, and so I'm not sure how it's possible to punish members when that has not been done. And so I think, as we talk about norms and traditions, I think it is really important that we respect each caucus to make the decisions for that caucus. But I have not punished anybody. And so I think those are, that's a blatant lie.
Representative, do you have time to stay for overtime? Could you do that or not, sir?
I can.
Okay, good. But before we put a ribbon on this thing, who were the stakeholders that wanted you to be in this leadership spot?
It's actually interesting. With my leadership run was kind of abnormal. I really kind of had an independent run that was very last minute. Really didn't kind of cut any deals or privately, publicly talk with many stakeholders. I really engaged my caucus individually as 52 members and earned the respect of those 52.
Mr. Leader, stand by. We're going to do closed credits, so we'll come back more of this. You having fun so far?
Yeah, I'm loving it.
That's the right attitude. Go to WKAR.org for overtime with the good leader from the Democratic caucus. See you on the other side.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.